Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Together we dive into the world of sci-fi and science fiction. From episodes of Star Trek, Star Wars, to The Walking Dead, Resident Evil, all the hot new science fiction movies from the back doors of Marvel or DC. The Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. You'll never look at science fiction the same way again.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Alex. You guys, last week was very exciting, and we still have a few days until Picard comes out. I don't know about you, but I am about to lose my mind. Today, we are going to talk about Tremors 2, because it is the 30th anniversary of Tremors this year. We're going to talk about Lost in Space, the new one and the old, Men in Black, Call of Duty Zombies, and how to introduce the new generation to sci-fi. Up first, we're going to talk a little bit about Trevorrow's leaked storyline excerpt and concept art. So before they gave Star Wars back to J.J. Abrams, Colin Trevorrow had already started some of his work for it. So he had a concept art for the new villain they were going to introduce named Tor Valum. And he looks kind of like a giant spider. He's really weird looking. But, you know, he can use the Force. And we don't actually get to see the mechanics of how he moves. So we're just going to have to kind of fill in the blanks on our own as to what he is or does. But he appears to be some sort of like aquatic spider creature in a way. He only has 6 legs from what I can see. And it looks like he's sitting in the water from the pictures that were uploaded. So this might have just been initial concept art, or perhaps the creature that he appears to be sitting on top of is Tor Valum, or it's a symbiotic creature. We don't really know. But it looks cool, and you should Google it to see exactly what that looks like. I'm going to also retweet that on our Twitter page later, so go ahead and add us, and you can see it there. Right now, he also has fascinated me with what he was going to do. So apparently, the entire time, Kylo was going to go to Mustafar, and he was looking instead for a holocron left for Vader by Emperor Palpatine before Vader, turned on him and threw him down the big old air shaft in the Death Star. And the holocron was supposed to direct Vader to finish his training with Tor Valum, who was supposed to have been one of Palpatine's, Sith Lords. The person who trained Palpatine. Anyway, so in that version, Kylo was going to go to Mustafar, find the holocron, and then go and finish his training with Tor Valum, or at least attempt to, in place of Darth Vader. So in the script, they described Tor as being non-human and Lovecraftian. So if you're a big fan of H.P. Lovecraft and Cthulhu, then he's supposed to be really creepy. Now, he doesn't look as creepy as what he's described as, but since this is concept art, we don't know if this is a first draft or what, and we may never know. Someone tweet Colin Trevorrow and ask. Maybe he'll tell us if they're not going to make it anymore. Maybe he won't mind sharing that. But it looks pretty interesting. I would have been intrigued to see what he would have done with it, and I would totally read a Legends book about it. I'm always interested to learn about more Sith Lords. But that's what we have so far. The next thing we have is that our lovely Darth Vader himself, James Earl Jones, turned 89 this past week. So happy birthday to James Earl Jones. Other birthdays and anniversaries this week were Star Trek Voyager turned 25 on January 16th. So everyone there has been celebrating their 25th anniversary. So lots of tweets from Kate Mulgrew. She said she just got the suit back out, or the uniform back out, so that she could have some nostalgia and take a look at it. I'm still going to hold out hope that we might see her in a future Star Trek at this point. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of hope. The worst that's going to happen is I'm just going to see Picard, and he's awesome. So we'll find out. Time will tell. We also had some new footage of Dune screened. So they showed it to a couple of people in the industry, including sci-fi novelist Brian Clement. And he talked about it a little bit without giving too much away so he didn't get in trouble with Warner Brothers. But Denis Villeneuve is currently in his post-production phase, and the movie is still supposed to come out in December of this year. So when they showed the footage, it didn't have any special effects finished yet, but it was also mixed in with some cast interviews and some behind-the-screen shots. So that's kind of cool, but it's definitely not ready for public release. So I'm not even sure how far out we are from a trailer. We're going to see. But we've already heard how Oscar Isaac has described it, and Brian Clement said that the cinematography was beautiful and stated, "I'm not exaggerating when I say a lot of people will have goosebumps/tears when they see this movie. I might. Heck, when they see the footage I saw, they will." So it sounds very exciting. He also said that it's not what he had envisioned when he read Dune the first time, but he thinks that that is a good thing. He said it's not like what Jodorowsky was going for or Lynch, but maybe Villeneuve has filmed the unfilmable. So I don't want to get my hopes up too high. I do like to hope for things a little bit, but I like to go into movies, particularly when they are remakes or new installments of my childhood favorites, with what I call Alex's principle of lowered expectations. So if I go into a movie with lower expectations, no matter what I'm going to watch, then inevitably I'm probably more likely to enjoy it than to be disappointed. Whereas if I go in with super high hopes, I have nowhere to go but down. And so I prefer to use Alex's principle of lowered expectations for viewing. So I'm a little bit excited, but cautiously optimistic. Now, he's also said that this is going to blow people away the way Lord of the Rings did 20 years ago and the way the original Star Wars did 40 years ago. So that's really exciting. That doesn't necessarily mean that it looks like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings. And we have to keep in mind that it's made by the guy who made Blade Runner 2049. So keep that in mind when you think about Clement's other quote as the footage having a mix of grimy realism mixed with dreamy imagery. They also showed some footage of Timothée Chalamet dressed as Paul, including some shots of him in his still suit, a couple with Jason Momoa, some of Stellan Skarsgård as Baron Harkonnen, and Dave Bautista apparently looks really creepy in the footage, which I am here for. I think they made a really good choice with him, and I'm excited to see where they go with it. He's honestly, I would say he's my favorite casting choice that they made. A lot of their casting choices for this surprised me. Not necessarily in a bad way, but I just haven't decided how I feel about it, and I don't think I'm going to be able to until I see the final product, to be honest. Even with Rogue One, I didn't think I was going to like it because of the trailer, but by the time I saw the movie, they cut out everything I didn't like, and then I really liked the movie. So I'm not even going to base it on the trailer. I'm just going to watch this Dune movie and see how I feel about it. They have Brian Herbert on board, though, as a producer. I know a lot of you may have mixed feelings about that, depending on how you feel about Brian in general and his work. I haven't heard anything about Kevin J. Anderson being involved, but there are like 4 other producers. And also Denis Villeneuve is supposed to be part of the Bene Gesserit TV series that they are allegedly going to work on. Warner Brothers wants to put that on their platform that will be in competition with Disney Plus and Netflix. I don't know how you guys feel about all of these competing streaming services, I'm really over it at this point. Now it's like, am I going to be paying the same amount for cable as I was before? Like, I'm just going to be paying for it in like 7 different apps at this point. But it's just getting ridiculous. Like, Star Trek is only on the CBS online, and now I have to have Disney Plus to watch The Mandalorian, and Netflix for pretty much everything else. And then, there's Hulu and Amazon Prime. So, like, my storage space on my Xbox is getting kind of full at this point from all these apps. Not really. They don't take up that much space because it's not stored locally. But you get what I mean. It's just a lot at this point. I'm excited, though, for the new Dune and to see where he takes the Bene Gesserit show. He's supposed to be the director for the first episode and then is a producer at least for the rest. So that has the potential to be really cool. This year is also the 30th anniversary of Tremors, one of my all-time favorite series. I love B movies, and Tremors is as B as it gets, but it's perfect, like, horror married with comedy. And that's like one of my favorite themes in movies. I really also loved Black Sheep and what is the other one? Slither. I really love Slither. So that all stems from my love of Tremors as a kid, and it really helped shape my sense of humor. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk more about Tremors.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now. Don't bother. What's hot on Netflix and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back. In our last segment, we were going over some announcements from the past week and some exciting events like anniversaries and birthdays. And right now, we're going to talk about Tremors, one of my favorite series of all time. So Tremors is often labeled more as horror than sci-fi. The first one did all right. It did pretty well, actually, with the science. They had a documentary maker from National Geographic named Ron Underwood. He helped develop the believable creature for Tremors, so the initial graboids. And the writers, S.S. Wilson and Brent Maddock, actually came up with the initial idea in the 80s while making educational safety videos for the Navy. And they were climbing desert boulders and imagining land sharks getting them trapped up there. And then Ron helped them go ahead and kind of design them. So that, I think, is really exciting that he kind of based that in biology as well. Now, the further you get along in Tremors, though, the further it gets away from the science in sci-fi. So I definitely understand why it is primarily billed as horror. But that said, you can use Tremors to get your friends who love horror a little bit more into sci-fi. I think it's a good transitional movie for introducing new folks to it. Now, it is a love letter to B-movie creature features, and my favorites of those are like the creature from the Black Lagoon. So it's one of the best. Out of all the monster movies, Tremors is an absolute classic. The characters are super wild and silly, and kind of they're almost camp. Like, they are real exaggerations of normal people. And I love that. They also have a grad student in it who is studying seismology, and that helps, kind of put some more of the science back in there. And I really enjoyed that. So with Tremors, I have recently rewatched both Tremors 1 and 2. I watched the first one with my godson, and I watched the last one, not the last one, but the second one, Tremors 2, last night with one of my good friends. So she's not really into sci-fi, but, you know, we tried it. She didn't love Tremors 2. I probably should have started with the first one because it was a little bit confusing for her, I think, but it was still worth it, I think, in the long run. Now, one other interesting fact is that Ariana Richards was in the original and the third one, Tremors 3, Back to Perfection, and she was also Lex in the Jurassic Park movies. I didn't realize that when I was a kid growing up, but I recognized her face this time. I was like, whoa, that's pretty cool. So she doesn't do movies anymore. She makes art, so that's pretty cool. But I really loved her playing those kids in some of my favorite sci-fi and horror movies. Now, Tremors 2 Aftershocks, I actually kept notes while I was watching that because it was just so crazy. Like, the graboids, quote-unquote, evolve by bursting forth from another one's belly, and that's really strange. Like, Earl says that, and I'm like, how does that even work? Does that even happen in nature? And then Earl likens it to a butterfly, but butterflies don't emerge from within the caterpillar, really, as far as I know. It kind of turns to goo internally, except for the imaginal discs that it has stored in its body from birth in order to recreate eyes and wings and everything, kind of like these little DNA blueprints for forming into a butterfly. And some other butterflies actually already have wings underneath their bodies, like when they're caterpillars, they have wings essentially beneath the skin that we can't see, and that is really wild. But mostly they just go into the cocoon, turn into goo internally, except there's imaginal disc, and then use those imaginal discs to reform as a butterfly within the chrysalis. Whereas in this one, it literally, like the one inside of it ate its way out. So it's not like it actually turned into another one and evolved. The offspring evolved. So Earl says it really weird, but whatever. It's sci-fi horror. It's fine. I want to know how many even came out at once. So they meet 4 at one time when they kill the first new one, the Shriekers. I don't know where the other 3 came from. They meet 4 all at once, kill the first one, then 3 more come around the corner. Did they all eat their way out like baby sharks? Like, were they fighting each other and the strongest one eats its way out and then also kills the parent? Or were there 4 inside the first one? Or was it, like, how did that happen? I'm very curious about that. I'm going to guess that there were 4 of them since the hole in it was so giant. And they said that it was eaten, the graboid was eaten in like 2 minutes. Now, Tremors 2, if you don't quite remember which one it is, it's the one where they get 2 legs, no eyes, and they are hunting graboids with dynamite strapped to RC cars, which is fairly hilarious to watch. I thought it was a very interesting approach to it. It's efficient. I'm here for it. It was very funny. And then we see the graboids start eating engines, the Shriekers. And so we know that the graboids are very smart from the first one, where they just keep trapping the humans, and the humans are having to work harder and harder to one-up them, because the graboids will eat all the way around a building or around a car to help collapse it into the ground to get to the humans on top. But the Shriekers, they are smart, but they sense heat instead. So they've evolved a little bit, but their senses have changed. So they're supposed to be blind and deaf, but they can sense body heat and also the heat from the engines. So they're not stripping out the cars because they are, trying to stop cars from running. They don't know the mechanics of it. They just know that there's heat. So it also gives off heat when it screams, which is weird. But okay. And they said that it signals with body heat, and they likened it to a rattlesnake. So they tried with the science. They're trying. At one point, Bert jumps into a metal bucket, though, of a construction vehicle. I don't know what kind of metal that's made out of. I tried Googling it, and I had some trouble finding the precise term for it. But metal in general, I think, tends to be heat conductive, so I'm not sure how long Bert really could have been in there before they recognized that he was in there. Also, the next shrieker, or the first shrieker, it vomits up a baby at some point. So that was pretty interesting. I'm not sure what that's supposed to be representative of in evolution, but okay. The lady did refer to it as a hermaphrodite, though. It looked like its reproductive and digestive tracts were the same, which was really interesting. With earthworms, at least, I Googled that, and they mate they are hermaphroditic, so they have both sets of organs, sex organs. It doesn't mean that they are capable of parthenogenesis, although some of them are, so reproducing asexually and making a copy of itself. But they have both sets of genitalia, and so they actually mate with each other, and they both inseminate the other, and then they have an organ on the outside of them, that little band on them, it's called the clatella, and so that moves the sperm over top of where the egg sacs essentially are, where the eggs are made, and then it creates a little cocoon that is expelled from them, and the eggs and the sperm are deposited in the cocoon. So it makes several little worms, and if conditions aren't right for hatching, such as it being too dry out, then the cocoons can be dormant for years and hatch when the conditions are right. So that's very interesting. And most of the babies hatch within 2 to 3 weeks, and new baby worms can reproduce on their own in about 6 weeks. So, I mean, that tracks for how quickly the shriekers start reproducing. Although it was kind of like, it reminded me of gremlins in a lot of ways, because they start reproducing from eating MREs and stuff. Anytime they eat something, then they kind of throw up an egg. And at one point they refer to it specifically as, oh no, they're going to eat all of that sugar, like all of those sugary snacks and stuff. So I'm not sure exactly where they're going with that, but it was cool. I also laughed really hard when the shriekers formed a cheerleader pyramid to hunt the larger group while Bert was in the bucket. That was hilarious. They can't see or anything. They can just heat sense, but they can also form a cheerleader pyramid. So that was cool. They knew somehow that they were up there. I don't know how they sensed them that far away, but they couldn't sense Bert and the bucket. Very, very interesting. Even when they were right next to Bert. And they stuck their little tongue tentacle things in there and almost touched him. But okay, it's neither here nor there. There's not a ton of sci in this Fi for Tremors 2, but there's some. And, it also reminded me a bit of Evolution with David Duchovny, Julianne Moore, and Orlando Jones. That's one of my favorites. And overall, I really enjoyed it. They did really get right, though, that creatures live to eat and reproduce. That is all graboids and shriekers do. By the end of Tremors 2, though, I did have an epiphany, you guys. I'm probably not the first one to think of this, because there's no such thing as an original idea, am I right? But the graboids and shriekers are the pro-climate, anti-fracking activists that we deserve. Both Earl and Grady are hired at a rate of $50,000 per graboid to hunt them down in an oil field in Mexico, because the graboids have been eating the oil workers. So in a sense, if you think about it this way, the oil company can be viewed as elitist eco-terrorists, and the worms are like the brown coats, but they're getting crushed in a climate civil war. So here we are. But we're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about Lost in Space.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back. In our last segment, we were talking about Tremors 2 and how the graboids and shriekers can be viewed as anti-fracking activists. Just depending on how you want to look at it. It's mostly just a very silly, fun story, but I also laughed pretty hard thinking about it that way. Next up, we're going to talk about Lost in Space. So Lost in Space is one of my all-time favorites. I feel like I say that about every sci-fi that we discuss. I love them all so much. When I was little, I watched the original TV series with my grandmother at her house. I'm not sure if she actively watched it with me, but I just remember watching it at her house. But I also watched a lot of things without her that I was not supposed to watch, like Jerry Springer. I was like 6, so I would wait until she fell asleep and then I'd watch Jerry Springer or Lost in Space and stuff. So I watched the original TV series and I loved it. And then I was very excited when the one with Matt LeBlanc came out. And I know that like a lot of critics didn't enjoy it, but as a kid, I really loved it. And Gary Oldman as Smith was just so creepy, especially when he turned into like the Spider Smith. So I really liked where they went with it. Penny was one of my favorite characters. Penny and Dawn, I think, have always been my favorites, at least for the movie and for the new TV series. The robot was my favorite in the original TV show, like way long ago. But Penny, I really loved her a lot. She's very sassy, but kind of street smart. And Dawn, same thing there. So I'm not sure why, per se, that's my favorite. And I like all of the other characters too. But those two are always my favorite. So I enjoy Matt LeBlanc being in it. I thought he was very funny as Dawn. And he did a pretty good job, I think, in nailing that kind of scoundrel swagger that James Bond and Han Solo have as well. So I like that. He's not as polished as Bond. He's closer to Han, but he was really funny, and I enjoyed that. The soundtrack for that one, though, it was so good, and it also had songs by like the Crystal Method in it. That was the first cassette tape I ever bought. So yes, I do mean cassette tape, not CD. I had a Walkman back then, and my parents had given me a Motown tape with it when I first got it for Christmas. But then I also got a little bit of money, and so I got to go and pick out my own tape too. And that was what I picked, was the Lost in Space soundtrack. That initiated my love of soundtracks for years to come. Over the years, I've purchased many soundtracks. I have Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan on vinyl. For no particular reason. I love that soundtrack, and I have a record player, and I happened to see it. It was like $2 at a local record store. So I have that one too. If you go to my Instagram, then you can see my cat trying to be a DJ with it, but I had to, yank her off of it after I got that cute video because I didn't want her to scratch my record too much. But it really was formative for me in a lot of ways, it's kind of weird, but especially considering that a lot of people did not like that movie, but I really enjoyed it. So I was very excited to see the new TV show come out. I really like the differences between the Smiths from the movie and the new TV show. So Parker Posey plays Smith in the new TV show. If you have not seen the show yet, skip ahead about 10 minutes and, we'll just go ahead and jump into Men in Black at that point. 5, 4, 3, 2. All right, we're going to go ahead and proceed with the spoilers. So Parker Posey plays Smith in this one, but Smith is not a doctor at all. She is just this manipulative person. She's a con artist who has conned her way on this trip to Alpha Centauri on the Resolve, and she's supposed to get a Jupiter as well. So she forged her identity to begin with to even get on there, and then she forges it again once she's on the Resolve by taking the identity of a doctor who is on board. And then she just, as lies go, they just keep compounding. They really snowball for Smith, and so she keeps having to find ways to dig herself out of the holes she's created herself. So it's very interesting to watch her fool people around her, but also not fool some people. So Dawn has a different reaction to her than Penny does, than Will does, than Maureen does. It's very interesting to watch how that goes. I particularly love her interactions with Penny because, as they put it, Penny is the most similar to her. And Penny's like, I am terrified I'm going to turn into you. I think that that's really important to watch Penny's choices as she goes along in fighting to be different from Smith while still embracing characteristics that they share that are not necessarily bad inherently. They're just used that way by Smith. So Penny has a lot of the persuasive ability that Smith has, but she uses it for good. So I really love watching her do that. Season 2 is out now on Netflix, and I am most of the way through it at this point. I was trying to savor it a little bit. Not gonna lie, I have trouble finishing shows sometimes because, I'm like, oh no, now it's gonna be over, and I'm gonna have to wait another year or 6 for it to come out. But season 2 is really good. You guys, episode 6, made me tear up. I'm not a weepy person, but with that episode, the show is not just about adventure and survival. It's also about family. So that episode really centered on the family connection between the dad and Judy. So they do it very well visually in all of these flashbacks. And they show the flashbacks initially from John's perspective. And then when it comes back around towards the end, you get to see them all pieced together back to back from Judy's perspective. And it was poetic, honestly, how they did it. It was like a Stephen Sondheim reprise. It was beautiful, and I really enjoyed seeing the emotion play out there and seeing John also tear up, at one point when Judy's doing her presentation about how much she loves her dad, and as he's watching her grow up over the years. It was just a beautiful presentation of how family is family and how they seamlessly wove in Judy's biological father into the narrative while still appreciating John too. So they made sure that she was aware of where she came from and that was an important part of her life. And it shows how her and John's relationship changed over the years. It just narratively, it was absolutely gorgeous. Visually, I loved it. The creatures hunting her down when she's like, oh yeah, I have 15 miles between me and dad. I have to run to get there. Okay, yeah, I'm just going to do it. Judy just bucks up and she's like, yeah, I'm going to run 15 miles and I'm going to get there super quick. And I'm also going to run through this crazy, dangerous area. My dad was a Navy SEAL. He taught me how to be out in the wild and I'm going to be fine. So it's just seamless transitions there. I loved it. I also really enjoyed the Swiss Family Robinson growing up and Robinson Crusoe, which is what this is based off of. It's about a family getting lost. Originally Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. That was just one man getting shipwrecked on an island and then having to build these different habitats and stuff. I loved those so much. And that also, I think, really was informed by Lost in Space. So I didn't read Robinson Crusoe until I was in about 4th grade, but it's one of my favorite series that I have ever, not series, it's one of my favorite books that I've ever read. Lost in Space is my favorite series. But I really enjoyed Robinson Crusoe and the Swiss Family Robinson. I saw that with my grandmother later on as a movie and everything. And I think they have the Swiss Family Robinson on Amazon Prime if you guys want to check it out. Robinson Crusoe is best read, I think. But it's a very old book. Now, the other thing that I really liked from this season was they referenced the trash compactor scene in Star Wars, but they did it in such a great way that it was just kind of a subtle nod to it. The only thing that was similar is okay, we're in a trash compactor and someone's about to get crushed. It did not precisely replicate how they get out of it, or the conversation that happens in there, or the way that they try to stop the walls. It was very well executed. I very much enjoyed that. So it wasn't over the top or too much. This show is very good, and the science in it is so good too. Like when Smith tells Penny to put a single earplug into her ear to help with motion sickness, I Googled that, and it says that does actually help a lot of people with motion sickness, and they recommend putting it in the ear opposite of the hand you're dominant with. So I am right hand dominant. I would put it in my left ear. I thought that was super cool. And as they went along, they mentioned different types of scientific stuff in the show, and every time I Googled it, it was true. And I was like, that's awesome. Y'all know I love my science heavy sci-fi. So that was really exciting for me. Season 1 was so good, and season 2, watching the characters develop, is amazing. The kid who plays Will, I swear he grew like a foot in that time, but that's okay. That happens when you're working with child actors. But I really like his story arc as well with the robots, and the point where he looks at the robot they're keeping in a cage, and it does not like him. It wants to kill him, and Will goes, you know, we might never be friends, but you don't belong in a cage. And I really like them showing his sensitivity to other creatures, even after they try to attack him. Will does a remarkable job. The boy who plays him does a fantastic job as well. I've really enjoyed watching this new series, and I can't wait to see what they do next. I'm scared Netflix is going to cancel it after season 3, as they tend to do, but it looks amazing, and I hope they continue with it. All right, we're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Men in Black.
Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about Lost in Space, the movie and the TV shows, particularly the brand new TV show and what's going on in season 2. If you're just joining us now, we're going to be talking about Men in Black. So again, I love Men in Black. It's one of my favorite movie series. I have not had the pleasure of reading the comics, but originally it was created and written by Lowell Cunningham and illustrated by Sandy Carruthers, published in Aircell Comics. Later on, Malibu Comics bought Aircell Comics, and then later on after that, Marvel bought Malibu. So technically, Men in Black now belongs to Marvel, which would belong to Disney, which is interesting. I wonder where they're going with that. I guess Princess Lorana and Laura are technically Disney princesses now. So that's pretty cool. More alien princesses. You guys, I watched Men in Black, the first one, on my birthday last Monday. Then I watched 2. I had a hard time finding 3, but I found 3 and international as well and was able to watch those. And I have to say, Men in Black 3 is the best Men in Black. I'm going to give you guys a second to have your reactions to that. Let me know on social media, in the comments, Facebook, Twitter, etc., how you feel about it, which one you think is the best one, and we can have a discussion about it. I love this one for several reasons. Josh Brolin, that man can act in anything. He blows my mind. He continually impresses me. And I loved him as playing the young Agent K in this movie. So if you haven't seen Men in Black 3, and you're not worried about spoilers, Then it came out in 2012, guys. It's been a while. But he plays young Kay, and it's a time travel one. Now, there are so many ways that this movie could have gone wrong. Like, on paper, this movie, like the third installment of a series where you don't even have Tommy Lee Jones in it the whole time. You have someone playing a younger version of him, and you only have one character you're familiar with, Jay, going back into the past with a new villain and everything as well. And, you know, you're not getting to see much of, we don't see Frank really in this. We don't see Zed because they do the memorial service for Zed beforehand because Rip Torn passed. And he's just like on his own with all of these new characters. But Josh Brolin, man, he totally delivers. This movie is not a catastrophe because it was cast very well. They did an exceptional job with the storytelling and not using a lot of expositional writing. They show us rather than telling us. And Tommy Lee Jones was still involved. So he's in the beginning and stuff, and he's at the end. And that's really awesome. It really gave the story some closure, in my opinion. And, you know, for that 3-part story arc. And, you know, Josh Brolin, he kicked butt. He was amazing. He plays Cable in Deadpool, if you're not sure I'm talking about. Jermaine Clement also played the bad guy in it, the villain. And he did such a great job. I not even realize it was him because of the heavy makeup and everything. But I recognized the voice, and I'm like, who is that? It's Jermaine Clement. So he's from Flight of the Conchords, and he also has recently worked as the giant snail in Moana. He is one of my favorites. That man is so funny, but he's also an exceptional actor. Bill Hader is also in it. I love him. And Michael Stuhlbarg did such an amazing job. That character he plays, who can experience all of the time possibilities at once. He's unstuck in time, kind of like Vonnegut's Billy Pilgrim and the Tralfamadorians. And he just views time as one unit. And so all time is possible. Like Yoda says, always in motion is the future. There are so many possibilities, but you don't know up until it's about to happen which possibility you're going to see. So there's just so many eventualities. And Michael Stuhlbarg did a fantastic job playing that alien. And he was so charming. I loved him. I thought he was Joaquin Phoenix with a lot of makeup on at first, but it was Michael Stuhlbarg. So I'm going to make sure that we all know his name because he was so good. He very much impressed me. I also like how in this movie it called out that women and people of color were oppressed in the 60s. So with time travel stories, a lot of times we don't bother to delve too far into that. But the guy who gives Jay the time travel device and tells him how to use it, he outright mentions that to him. And then we get an emphasis on that when Jay is pulled over for driving a nice car and wearing a suit while being black. He was just pulled over for driving while being black. And he gets to really one-up those cops and everything, and also gets to neuralize them and reset them. And I thought that was very well done. I also enjoyed them showing how women in the workplace weren't allowed to be agents. So O was stuck in the role of admin assistant, and she likely would have stayed there forever, despite how smart she is, if those changes had not happened to allow women to be in the workplace. Jay wouldn't have been there if people of color had not been allowed to be there. So it was so sci-fi in that way, and there I had that socio-cultural component that I really love, that we love about Star Trek and stuff. It was super cool that they put that in there. And it's just so interesting to me that Emma Thompson as O is, you know, the head now of MIB, and she just started out as an admin assistant. So just working her way up through the ranks. I thought that was a really cool way to show that instead of just telling us. Let's see. Let's also talk about the heartwarming story circling around to Jay's dad. Oh my gosh, my heart I saw it coming from a mile away, and I still was just like, oh, oof, ouch, my heart. That it was just so well done and so poignant with how that really changed Kay as a person. Because he realized that this kid went back in time and saved his life at the expense of his own father dying. So he grew up without a father because he was saving Kay, who is like a father figure to him. It was very beautiful. I also like the themes in Men in Black. So for the whole series, the themes are like appearances can be deceptive. You see that in each of those. And like Kay says in Men in Black 2, you always are who you are, even when you forget. So I really enjoyed seeing those themes replayed. Like I said before, like it's poetic. George Lucas talks about Star Wars and how each of the stories and the trilogies themselves kind of rhyme. They have a similar pattern and scheme to them. I think we don't tend to watch Men in Black back to back a lot or talk about it in the same way that we do Star Wars, but it is every bit as much of a rhyming scheme and poetry as Star Wars is. It tells it with more humor, so I think that we tend to overlook that. But go back through and watch it again. Watch them in the same week at least, and look for those themes. Men in Black International even attempts to address that with H. But I felt it fell a little flat for me because we don't see H before his decline really. So it doesn't resonate as well with the viewer, particularly emotionally. So that's the big thing about Men in Black 3 is that we've known Kay for 2 movies already. And, you know, he's just usually this stoic guy. And you see that he's, you know, still kind of soft on the inside, though, when he goes back to his wife. And then she ends up leaving him and he kind of goes back to being hard. And then they deneuralize him and he, you know, is the old Kay that we remember. So he's hard again. And then when we see that softer side of him in Josh Brolin's outstanding performance, he nails Tommy Lee Jones's accent and cadence and everything without it being an impersonation per se. And we see him be like that. And then Jay's like, man, what happened to you? And he's like, I don't know. Hadn't happened yet. And then we see what happened. And it's like, oh, you're gutted. But with H, you don't quite feel the same way about it because we're told, not shown, that H used to be really great. And now he is, you know, having a lot of trouble in the workplace and with just taking this, you know, seriously at this point because he's kind of emotionally damaged. I still love Men in Black International, though. I love Tessa Thompson. I also love that it underlined the importance of kindness and compassion and how it pays dividends. So it was very much what goes around comes around with Luca and Molly. Luca plays such a small part in the movie, but is a huge influence on M. And you can see how they influence each other and how it twists it back, just like reversing the rhyming scheme of the others. All right, guys, we are going to go on another quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Call of Duty Zombies.
The GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Before the break, we were talking about Men in Black, one of the best series around. especially for sci-fi. We talked about how it has its own rhyme scheme, similar to Star Wars, and it does have messages about appearances being deceptive and always being who you are, even when you forget for a little bit. Now we're going to talk about Call of Duty. So I love Call of Duty Zombies. I have played most of the Call of Duty games, but I do not play the actual regular Melee or even the storylines. I played the first 10 minutes of Infinite Warfare, and I was like, this is not for me. But zombies, I love. Black Ops 2 Zombies, I played like crazy during graduate school and afterwards. It was so much fun. My favorite is probably the town. I like the town and the farm the most. I did not really enjoy Transit, but I also enjoy the special levels for it, like Nuketown. That's a lot of fun, but I find that it's easier for me to back myself into corners in Nuketown than the others. So we generally, me and my ex and our friend Johnny, we play it a lot when we are together. Even now, we will play Black Ops 2 Zombies. We have Spaceland and Infinite Warfare, and we love that one too. But Black Ops 2 just really is nostalgic for us because it takes us back like 10 years ago to when we first met and we were all playing this together and we were babies. So it's just so much fun. I mostly get my tools from the random box. I don't really like buying most of the weapons from the walls. I only do that if I'm very desperate and I can't afford the random box yet. And I always go for Juggernog first. You know, I need more hit points so I can stay up for a little bit longer. It's one of my favorites though, and I play it with my godson now as well, which is a lot of fun to get to share that with him. He's very into sci-fi, he's very into video games, which he also gets from me. I used to live with them, and then when I had to move away for grad school, I left my DS with him, and he was like 3. And by the time I came back to visit a couple months later for Christmas, he had already mastered Donkey Kong Country and everything. It was wild. He just picked that up natively. And I get why, because he is part of that generation where they've always grown up with electronics. But it just blew my mind. And he's very good at all of those games now. It's a lot of fun to get to share those things that I love with him. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But we're going to go back to zombies a little bit. Okay, so I mostly use the random box. Johnny always likes getting those brass knuckles and stuff. And then we also really love pack-a-punching things. So that's one of our main goals, is just survive long enough that you can pack-a-punch. And then just go buck wild with whatever you have packed. I like the Galil and the hammer. And there's one more. The MTAR, the LTAR. I don't remember which one. But it's also amazing. It's been a while since I've played that. I need to go back and play that one some more. Spaceland though. Ooh, I love Spaceland. So the reason I love Spaceland is it's mission based. So you guys know I really am into efficiency and productivity. I like to have real goals. Most of the other Black Ops games are just grinding. You're just trying to survive for the longest. But with zombies in Spaceland, the 80s theme one, you are actually on like this, you don't have to do the mission, but you're on a mission to blow out the back of the alligator's mouth and get the special weapon and everything. And a lot of people, every time I play online, they go ahead and they kill the brute, and it drives me crazy because then it like messes up the mission. But you know, if I'm not wearing my headset and they don't know, then they can't know. I mean, I get that. The best players I've ever played with online with Spaceland, though, were actually 2 10-year-old boys. And they were super nice and wholesome and great teammates. If you went down, they would come and get you, and they were real polite and everything. And they just chatted the whole time about wholesome kid stuff. It was adorable, and it was so much fun. Like, I swear, best teammates. I don't think that they're probably listening to this, but if you are, and you remember playing with Sharknado Week, hey guys, you were awesome. This was probably a year or 2 years ago. So they're like 12 now, but you guys were hilarious and super wholesome, and I appreciate you. I think that when you play that game, I like to go to the right first. I don't like going up the ice mountain. That always seems to be bad news bears for me because there are so many different entry points for them, and you have to have a lot of money already stored up in order to purchase everything along the way. It's a lot. It's a lot, you guys. I also usually get the, whatchamacallit. I usually use the random box, for all the things. I do purchase guns off the wall initially, though, if the random box is up past Polar Peak or something, and it's going to take me a lot to get back there, or I can't quite see exactly where it is yet. So I'll buy a thing off the wall for a minute, but they're only good for a couple levels. And then you really get your butt kicked. I also like that it's cooperative in opening the doors. So it's not just one person putting in $1,000 or whatever to open one door. It's, this little red meter on it where everyone can see how far away you are from it, and you can put increments in it so people can take turns. I like the monetary sharing system as well, but if you're playing online with people who like to just give you a hard time, then they're just going to steal your money. So I don't use that a lot unless I'm just playing strictly with my friends, because then it just gets frustrating. But I love the clown levels. Those crack me up. I forgot to mention the ray gun. I love the ray gun in the Black Ops Zombies games. In general, I just love splash damage. It's a lot of fun. Overall, though, it's just a really great series of games. If you haven't played the zombies levels, go check it out. If Call of Duty is just not really your thing, the zombie part is so fun, and it's not a competitive game, really. You can make it competitive if you want yourself, but just by changing how you play and trying to kill the most and get the most money and everything. But I really like playing it cooperatively as well, and that makes it really friendly for, teaching new people how to do it, getting new folks into it. So whether that's your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your non-binary partner, or, kids that you're trying to introduce to new sci-fi stuff, it can be a really fun way to do that. All right, guys, we're going to go on another break. And when we come back, we are going to dive into how to introduce the new generation to sci-fi.
The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Before the break, we were talking about Call of Duty Zombies, Black Ops 2, Infinite Warfare, Spaceland, all that jazz. I love those games. I love zombie anything, and those are a lot of fun. I love that sometimes you look like an astronaut, and sometimes you look like like Men in Black, really. It looks really cool, and I enjoy it a lot. It's very fun. And then Spaceland, you're all 80s themed characters. I've had a lot of fun with that over the years. Right now, though, we're going to talk about introducing the new generation to sci-fi. So, you don't actually have to start with just sci-fi for kids, but you can. Sci-fi for kids, and sci-fi adjacent, really. I would count, I would count Alice in Wonderland in that. I have read that with Logan. We read that together. Then we made a diorama for class, and we watched the old cartoon. And that was so much fun for us. He didn't think that he was going to enjoy it as much as he did. And then he's like, whoa, this world is crazy. I need to watch the newer movie and Through the Looking Glass with him. but he really enjoyed that. And that was just a great experience to have together, to get to witness him experiencing Alice in Wonderland for the first time and just crazy math and making sense from nonsense. And sometimes there's just nonsense. It was a blast. Let's see. Also, the Magic School Bus. I would totally think of that as sci-fi. I recently watched one of the episodes from the original where Miss Frizzle decides to take the kids to learn about muscles and bones and connective tissue and kind of how your body works. So she takes the school bus to go and get some maintenance done. And while they're at this junkyard getting maintenance done, Miss Frizzle's hanging out with this old friend of hers who seems like a love interest as well. And the kids are trying to perform shenanigans. So Ralphie's like, I'm gonna go ahead and make a fake Ralphie to trick her to think that I'm doing work when I'm not. And he goes to make this robot. And it's like the first iteration of the robot is, you know, it very much looks like it's just made out of like the metal handlebars of a bike and stuff. They're just using things they found in the junkyard. And it doesn't look that real and it can't move or anything. And then they're like, okay, well, with muscles, this is how those work. So maybe we need to give him an approximation of muscles. And so they put these little valves on him and do some other stuff to him. And then it gets to the point where the robot comes to life because he's now able to move around and everything. And he takes Ralphie's hat and puts the pot that Ralphie had put on his head as a hat on Ralphie's head and just causes general mayhem until they go through and in what I think is kind of brutal if you think about it, but it's not played that way for TV, so it's not scarring or anything. But they're like, oh, okay, so this is how movement works in biomechanics in a human body. So we need to remove his muscles so he can't move and stuff. So they start snapping the muscles and everything off until the robot, once he's no longer mobile, collapses into a heap. And Miss Frizzle is just so proud of the children doing this. But it seemed kind of grim to me as an adult. As a kid, I thought it was just cool. But I'm like, whoa, you are just like methodically killing this new creature you've birthed. It's like making Frosty the Snowman and then putting a hairdryer on him. It was wild. But I really love the Magic School Bus. It's so fun and it's very science-heavy sci-fi. So, you know, there's the sci-fi of the bus being able to turn into all of these different shapes and it can shrink and grow and it can go inside their bodies and experience the digestive system. It's a lot of fun and it's really good for small kids because it's fantastical and fun, but it's also teaching them science. So they get a love of sci-fi and also some real science with that. Another one I'd recommend is The Secret of NIMH. Although most of it is about the mom and the kids trying to avoid the tractor and stuff during harvest time. Once you get really into it, this is a really old movie, so none of these should be spoilers for anybody. The Secret of NIMH has a mouse in it a lab rat named Nicodemus, and he was a science lab rat, and that's partly why he's so smart and all this stuff. So they do delve into that a little bit. And it talks to kids essentially about, you know, when you plow an ecosystem, you're plowing your farm, you know, there's a whole tiny ecosystem underground and that you don't really think of. But these are the creatures that are affected by it. It's not anti-farming or anything by any means. It's just really interesting and thinking about the things around you. Fern Gully is very similar in that way. I loved Fern Gully. Now, I think that it's probably straddles the line of horror and fantasy and sci-fi. It has the messages of sci-fi and it's about ecological destruction and environmental issues, but it also has like a fairy in it and then some, you know, the pollution and stuff is essentially like a creature for it and the bat talks. So it kind of straddles the line, but it's really fun because you can go in any direction with that and then see what the kid likes the best about it. Did they like how creepy it was? You know, if they like creepy and fantasy and stuff, maybe do All Dogs Go to Heaven. That's a great Don Bluth one. Or do Rockadoodle. That's a lot of fun too. It's not sci-fi, but it's fun. And then you can see if, you know, okay, that was too scary for them. Let's maybe dial it back and go towards Wishbone. So Wishbone if you guys remember him, the little Jack Russell Terrier on PBS was one of my favorites growing up. He's still super cute today. And, well, on TV he is. I don't know how Wishbone's doing nowadays, you guys, but I'm pretty old now, so I'm guessing he's not. But anyway, away from the sadness. Wishbone did a whole bunch of classic novels, but he also did a lot that I would classify as sci-fi. Things like, I think he did Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I know that he did The Time Machine. That's like an iconic episode of it. Rip Van Winkle, which I classify as either sci-fi or fantasy, considering that man sleeps for like 100 years before he comes back. I read that one with my godson as well as a great illustrated classic. So there are these books. It's like a book series, and they're called the Great Illustrated Classics, and they were some of my favorites growing up that my grandma got for me. And they're classics, but written in a way that kids can understand. So he's read Frankenstein and Dracula, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde that way. And I love doing those with him, like reading through them and then talking to him about it. And I also purchased him a comic book, like a graphic novel really, of Frankenstein that was at his grade level. So you can find grade level novels that are turned into graphic novels online, and then order them in paperback form for the kids to read. And it has learning outcomes in the back of them and everything too, and questions that you can ask them. So they can do those in the back for fun, or you can do those with them just to help them work on their reading comprehension as well. Or you can just do it for, like, read the story for the fun of it. So he likes really creepy stuff like I do. He gets it from me. And so he really particularly loves like Frankenstein and stuff. That's why I bought him that one. He likes the stuff with wolves and creepy stuff too. So you have a lot of options with the Great Illustrated Classics because you have things like Frankenstein, which were, the original sci-fi, some of the original sci-fis, that I would totally classify it that way. Dracula is more, fantasy, but still, it's sci-fi adjacent, and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is sci-fi. So those are all good choices, I think, for kids. Also, A Wrinkle in Time. That's another great one that they can read with you, or they can read on their own, and then you guys can watch the movie and get them used to seeing like movie adaptations of books that they love. That's really exciting. Also, particularly with classics, they're going to have to read those in high school anyway. And if you can instill a love of those stories at a young level or a young age, then it's going to be a lot easier on them later on to read those. That's my theory. My godson is going to be 12 this year, so he is in junior high now and getting about to the point where he's going to have to start reading these books that we've read for fun for actual class and read them at the class level of, how the originals were actually written rather than reading Great Illustrated Classics. So that's going to be very exciting for me to see if that has actually worked. It's kind of a social experiment that he's totally down for, but we've been working on that for years. So here's to hoping that that pays off and that he doesn't feel like he just has to read these things. I hope it imparts a sense of enjoyment for him the way that it did for me when I was growing up. All right, guys, that's about all we have time for today, but I've been enjoying our time together. I hope you guys go ahead and add us on Twitter, Facebook, anywhere on social media, and go ahead and tweet and message us so we can talk about introducing the new generation to sci-fi, how you guys do that. Whether that's Stargate and the watch list that I mentioned last time to get new folks into it. That one is going to help me every time. Logan loves it now. Jack O'Neill is our shared favorite. Sam is my second favorite. And Teal'c is his second favorite. Or maybe he might even be in the lead for that. I don't remember. I'm going to have to ask him. But those are our two favorite characters each. And that's a lot of fun to be able to get to share that with my godson. It's just so much fun getting to share the things that you love with other people and watching new people, get into the things you love for the first time. So go ahead and sound off in the comments about how you introduce new folks to sci-fi. Tell me about how you love different video games that have sci-fi and sci-fi adjacent themes, and whether you think I'm crazy for thinking Men in Black 3 is the best Men in Black. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That always really helps us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I'd appreciate it. Thank you kindly, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.